Hello, TOEFL students. Today we're going to talk about speaking question 6 on the TOEFL IBT. Many of my students find this to be the most difficult question on the TOEFL speaking section. So let's go over it today and talk about how to successfully answer speaking question 6. Now, first of all, speaking question 6 is a lecture. It's academic. It could be about biology, which it typically is, history, it could be about archaeology, psychology, and so on. And the way it's usually structured is in 3 parts. There's the introduction, which is several sentences, which you do not have to repeat. Then there's topic number 1 and an example. And then there's topic number 2 and an example. Now, the introduction is not something you need to repeat. Again, if you do, it will take up too much of your time. Remember, this is a 2-minute lecture or more, and you only have 1 minute to respond. So what you actually want to do is in that 1 minute, divide it into 30 seconds, 2 parts. 30 seconds for the first topic and example, 30 seconds for the second topic and the example. The introduction is just to orient you to the task. So let's say it's a class about forest fires and the 2 benefits. Well, the professor will orient you to it by saying something like this. Today, we're going to talk about forest fires. Now, normally we think of forest fires as destructive, and they certainly can be very damaging to homes and property. But it may surprise you to hear that there are actually benefits to forest fires. Okay, so that would be the part that's the introduction. And the only thing you need to repeat from that is, according to the lecture, there are benefits to forest fires. Nothing else, okay? No more than that. You do not have time. Then she will use a verbal cue to indicate that she is going to her first topic. So she might say the first, or one, or let's first talk about, or let's address. And then you write a one and then the topic on your paper. So let's say she says, one benefit of forest fires is it makes it easier for certain predators to capture their prey. So all you write down is predators capture prey. You do not need to write down full sentences. You can reconstruct it when you speak. You just need to have the key words, okay? Then she will give a specific example. On your notes, write EX and circle it. You must get the example to get the full score. So she might say something like, for instance, there's a certain species of wild turkey that actually benefits from forest fires so much it will seek them out and stand outside the forest that is burning. So why does it do this? Well, the wild turkey does this because it's easier to capture insects when they're fleeing the forest. After all, when insects are up in the air, it's a lot easier to jump up and snatch them than the usual way that turkeys have to dig from the ground. Now, you don't need to write down a lot of words here. You can just write down EX, wild turkeys eat insects, easier to pluck from air than dig from ground. Again, we can grammatically reconstruct this when we speak. Then she will move on, and again, she's going to use a verbal cue here to indicate she's moving on. She might say the other, another, or she might say something more informal, like, okay, now let's turn our attention to, or now let's discuss. So, for example, she might say here, now let's turn our attention to a way plants benefit from forest fires. Well, some plants are able to get sunlight after a forest fire. So you write down the number 2, plants able to get sunlight, okay? And then she'll go on with a lot of words. You don't have to write them all down. She might say, of course, many of you know that plants need a certain amount of sunlight in order to survive. And there's a certain type of grass called European grass that needs a great deal of sunlight to survive, which often isn't available under the canopy of the forest. But after a fire, much of this canopy has been burned out, and the European grass can grow very well because now there are no leaves that get in the way and block the sunlight. So the sun can come directly down onto the grass and it thrives in that condition. So you would write down EX, European grass, a lot of canopy burned out, leaves burned away, grass gets sun, grows well. And you can reconstruct it when you speak. Okay, so how do we answer this question? We want to start with something like the professor discusses two, and then types, kinds, definitions, advantages, reasons, whatever it is, it's going to be broken into two. So we need to introduce it in that way. And then the first is, and describe the first, which you have in your notes. Then use a certain phrase like the professor gives the example of, or the professor illustrates this with the example of, and then give the example. Now, at 30 seconds, we want to move on to our second topic. So then you'll say something like, the second advantage, reason, whatever it is the professor illustrates with this with the example of, and then describe the example. No conclusion necessary. So let me give you an example of the one about fires. Here's how a good sample answer would sound. According to the lecture, there are two benefits of forest fires. The first is it makes it easier for predators to find prey. The professor gives the example of wild turkeys, which will seek out a forest fire because it makes it easier for them to find insects. They can just pluck them from the air instead of pecking from the ground. That's a much easier way to find their prey. The second advantage of forest fires is that certain plants can grow better because they can get sunlight. The professor gives the example of European grass that needs a lot of sunlight to grow. After a forest fire, the canopy has been burned and the grass can get sun, and thusly it grows very well after a fire. So that's how you answer question 6. Again, this is Kathy from House of TOEFL, and please contact me if you have any more questions. I'm at www.houseoftofl.com. Thank you.